It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Well, here we are out of the All-Star break, and the New York Mets continue to not be able to beat those sons of bitches from South Florida, the Miami Marlins. This is a 4-game series. The series is not over, but the Mets have already lost 2 out of 3 to the Miami Marlins. This sucks. And look, when the Mets were playing great baseball, and I guess I could say were, because when you take the Sunday game against Colorado before the All-Star break, which felt like an innocuous loss, you can't win them all. They had a great homestand. When you take the finale against Colorado and you take these 2 losses to Miami, here are the facts. The New York Mets have now lost 3 out of 4 games to 2 of the crappiest teams in Major League Baseball and the clear 2 worst teams in the National League. But when the Mets were playing well, when the Mets were at their best, they did it with a dynamic offensive team, with a lineup that always seemed to come up with the big hit. And over these 3 games down in South Florida, they have failed time in and time out. And what was so disturbing about the Sunday game was that the Miami Marlins were serving it up. They were handing it to the Mets. They were giving this offense so many freebies, so many golden opportunities, and they couldn't take advantage of it. That's number one. Number 2, they made the Marlin bullpen look like it was the 96 Yankees. That's number 2. Number 3, the All-Star break comes. You're feeling good. I think we're all feeling good. Mets are in a playoff spot. They're probably going to be buyers. To come out and play this kind of garbage baseball over the last 3 days is unacceptable. And the only game they won, which we'll address, was based on the fact that Luis Severino and the Met bullpen, pitched great, but we're also kind of lucky. They won a very lucky 1-0 game. So this has been, I think, as bad of a script as you can write coming out of the All-Star break against a team that you got to beat up. And all season long, the Mets have had issues with this Miami Marlin team. They have now played 9 games against the Marlins, and they're 4-5. Meanwhile, the Marlins can't beat anybody else in the National League East. They get their ass kicked by everybody else. They're 9-20 in the National League East. They're 5-4 against the Mets. And the formula, and it really dates back to the last couple of games of that Colorado series, is that they can't get a big hit. On Sunday afternoon, as they are stymied for 2 runs, one of them earned against Trevor Rogers and then nothing against the Marlin bullpen, the Mets went 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position. If you go to Saturday's game, sure, it's a game they won, but it's also a game where they left 10 men on base. They were 0 for 7 with runners in scoring position. So let's keep a running total now. 1 for 8, 0 for 7. I got them at 1 for 15. Then you go to Friday's game. They were 1 for 7. So wait a second, 1 for 15. Now I'm at 2 for 22. So over these 3 games against the Miami Marlins, in which they're facing Edward Cabrera, who came into the game with an 8.26 ERA, couldn't get through the 5th inning. Roderick Muñez came in with a 5.5 ERA, did pitch 5 innings. And then against Trevor Rogers, who's been crap ever since his rookie year, he can't get through the 5th inning. And the Mets managed to go 2 for 22 with runners in scoring position. And you take your pick on who you want to blame. J.D. Martinez, who did finally come through with a base hit on Sunday. You want to kill Pete Alonso? That's fine. Kill everybody. This has been a collective failure, these 3 games, this stinkfest of 3 games against the Marlins. You're facing a Miami team whose starting pitchers, all 3 of them. The Mets should have bombed all 3 of them with the opportunities they had. Look, Tanner Scott, he's going to get the Marlins a return. That's one thing. He's the one guy who the Mets have faced. He was the hero on Friday, did a great job on Sunday as well. He's the one guy you can look at and say, you know what? That guy's legitimately kicking ass. But other than that, I'm not tipping my hat to the Marlin pitching. This has basically been ineptitude. This has been brutal to watch. Coming out of the break playing this kind of crap baseball. And look, if the Mets are going anywhere, and the schedule is about to stiffen, this is the end of the quote-unquote easy part of the schedule. And honestly, when you add it up, it's not like they've done major damage. They did a really good job on that homestand, sweeping Washington, winning 2 out of 3 against Colorado. But outside of that, it's not like they were killing teams. When you look at kind of the entirety of this soft part of the schedule. I don't know if you want to include Houston, even though they were right around 500 going into that series. Obviously, they have taken off, and that is not a surprise to anybody. They now control the American League West. But you look at the road trip in Washington, Pittsburgh, the homestand against Washington, Colorado, and now against Miami. It's not like they have really done incredible damage against these mediocre teams. And look, some are mediocre, some aren't. The Pittsburgh Pirates have taken off. They're now a team that's certainly in this race for the wild card spot. The Nationals are kind of on the lower end of things. The Rockies stink. The Marlins stink. Those are the two teams you got to beat the crap out of. I mean, forget Washington and Pittsburgh for a second. The Rockies and the Marlins are the teams you got to beat up. And they weren't able to do it. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start at Friday night as they come out of the break. And they come out of the break with Sean Manaea giving up base hits all over the place in the second and third inning and allowing the Marlins to jump up to a 4-0 lead. It included Jeff McNeil, who was really the only guy who showed up coming out of the All-Star break, making that great leaping catch against Brian De La Cruz in the first inning. So it really should have been worse for Sean Manaea. But I honestly thought the tone for this second half, and hopefully we're going to look back at 3 games in Miami, a 4th coming up on Monday, and maybe forget about it and maybe think about it as a footnote. But if this season goes in the wrong direction, much like what happened in 2021 when they lost the last game before the All-Star break against the Pittsburgh Pirates. They came out of the All-Star break and they basically got lit on fire. We never saw DeGrom again. They made the big trade for Javi Baez. They completely crumbled. Hopefully this is not what we're talking about. But the tone for the second half, I thought, was set in the very first few innings of that game against Miami on Friday night. You get a leadoff walk where Edward Cabrera can't find the strike zone. I think the first 6 were out of the strike zone. Lindor walks, steals second base. Nimmo rips one towards second. Otto Lopez makes this great play, but productive out because the Mets have a runner on third and 1 out. So great, worst case scenario, Mets should take a 1-0 lead. JD Martinez draws a walk, and then Pete Alonso, who's going to get a lot of crap, and he should. I'm not going to defend him. Bounces into a backbreaking double play. And I know that sounds crazy. How could a double play in the first inning be backbreaking? Well, considering what happened next, it turned out to be the case. And it really set the tone for this game against Miami. You have a runner on second, runner on third with less than 2 outs. You got to score him. You got 2 on, 1 out with your cleanup hitter coming up. You got to score him. That was opportunity number 1 that they let go by the wayside. Then Sean Manaea ran into that trouble in the second inning, gave up an RBI, singled Xavier Edwards, gave up a sac fly to Emmanuel Rivera. He was lucky. The ball was being scorched off him. And really, the ball was being scorched off Sean Manaea all day long, which will get me to Mendoza in a second. He gives up 2 more runs in the third inning. Jake Berger gets an RBI double. What a series he's had so far. Josh Bell gets an RBI single. And, I think what confused me about the way Mendy handled Manaea is this. All year long, he's been very careful with Sean Manaea 3rd time around the order, right? Haven't we noticed that? Kind of looks at Sean Manaea and says, you know what? I got 5-6 good innings out of him. He's pitched great. I'll take him out. Now, in his last start, he was able to stretch 7 out of him. But I think the circumstances were what's led to that. The Mets had a big lead, and I think Mendy figured, you know what, let me push it a little bit with Sean Manaea. So you got to walk me through this. You're coming out of the All-Star break, and you've got a completely fresh bullpen. You're down 4-0. Mets actually scored 2 runs in the 5th inning, which was nice to see Jeff McNeil hit that home run. And then they were basically given a run on that error by Cabrera. But I think if memory serves correct, it was a play Josh Bell should have made. I think it was a pickoff attempt that bounced away. Either way, they'd given a run. So all of a sudden, it's a 4-2 game. 5th inning, heart of the order coming up. Manaea is not fooling anybody. Everybody's hitting the ball hard against Manaea. His pitch count is at 72, and he's 3rd time around the order. And he's about to face Jake Berger, who smoked an RBI double an inning earlier. Why is he still in the game? I understand certain circumstances where you're trying to stretch your starting pitcher. You're trying to get a little bit of length. This is the first game out of the All-Star break, and you've taught us that for the most part, you're going to be careful with pushing Manaea third time around the order. So I don't get this. You're coming out of the break. You have a fresh bullpen. He's getting smoked. Like Sean Manaea is lucky at that point. It's a four spot he's given up. It should be more. I mean, remember, McNeil's climbing the fence, robbing one from Brian De La Cruz. So that was issue number one. Like, why even have him come out and pitch the fifth inning? And what does he do? He immediately gives up a home run to Jake Berger. Keeps him in the game. But I don't want to kill just Sean Manaea, and I don't want to kill, Dednell Nunez, who gave you really one of his first mediocre performances, had some control issues, issued a couple of walks, threw a wild pitch, gave up a big RBI single to Nick Fortes. This comes down to the offense. This comes down to, other than Jeff McNeil, who we give credit to, at least on Friday, I don't have any faith now that all of a sudden he's going to become red hot. I'm not going to be that delusional. But Jeff McNeil hit 2 home runs. He made a great defensive play in right field. He was called for an error. That was a BS error. He actually made a really good throw to third base, and the ball hit the base runner. So kind of a fugazi error on Jeff McNeil. Other than Jeff McNeil, they couldn't buy a big hit. Ever. Whether it was the first inning with Alonso bouncing into a double play, whether it was J.D. Martinez with 2-1 and 2 out in the third inning, whether it was in that fifth inning when Francisco Alvarez came up with 2 men on base. Couldn't buy a big hit. And then obviously the eighth inning was the real killer. And give Skip Schumacher credit because he went for the kill with Tanner Scott, who right now, you have to think, when you look at all the realistic bullpen arms that are out there before the trade deadline, and I'd love Tanner Scott. I think we all would. But the return on him is probably going to be massive, considering how well he's pitching. Now, he did a great job against the Mets. Comes into a 1-run game in the eighth inning, 2 on, 2 out. Here's how locked in Tanner Scott is and the confidence that Skip Schumacher had in him. He went to him and turned Francisco Lindor around to his stronger side. And basically, what Schumacher's thinking is, who cares? You know what? I got my best pitcher on the mound. It doesn't matter what side Lindor's on. He'll get him out. And he got him out very, very quickly. Pitched a dominant 1-2-3 ninth inning. Obviously, the Mets gave up an insurance run in that eighth inning. That was the Dednell Nunez performance. But really, it came down to the offense. The offense couldn't do anything. And I thought the first inning of that game really set the tone. And that's just, it's a sucky way to come out of the All-Star break when you're sitting in a wild card spot. We're all feeling good. We're all thirsty for baseball. I certainly was. It was weird. I was watching this game in Mexico in the Mountain Time Zone. So it was actually a 5 o'clock first pitch watching Mets Marlins coming out of the All-Star break. And I don't know why. I had a bad feeling watching this game. And it wasn't just the top of the first inning. Something stuck with me after that Colorado loss. And I obviously didn't say it on the Rico because, look, they went 5-1 on their homestand. But I guess it's like the bad memories of what happened in 2021, where a loss before the break turned into something more than you could have imagined at the time. And I hope it doesn't. But obviously, this series has already been a dud. Like, even if they win on Monday, trust me, I want them to win on Monday. I'd be thrilled if they win on Monday. But we're going to look back at this and say, you kidding me? They went 2-2 against the crappy Miami Marlins. So that was Friday's game to start the break. Saturday's game, let's face it, the one run they scored, the one freaking run that they scored in this game was when Francisco Alvarez came up with the bases loaded and hit a ground out that could have been a double play. Now, luckily, it wasn't. It was a fielder's choice. It was actually a really good play by Xavier Edwards, a nice sliding play to give the Mets a 1-0 lead in the fourth inning. And that's it. That's the only freaking run they could get. And it was the same story, missed opportunities. Jeff McNeil, I know he had the one line out with guys on base, but he had 2 strikeouts and a little weak pop-up to third base. I was hoping, naivete, that Jeff McNeil was going to build off of the 2 home run game on Friday. I was hoping. I didn't believe it, but I was hoping. And he responds with an 0 for 4 with 3 weak outs and 1 line out. But then, fifth inning, another great opportunity. 2 on, 1 out. J.D. Martinez hits into some bad luck. A line drive right at the third baseman turns into a double play. They given another great opportunity in the 7th inning when Josh Bell commits a throwing error, when Jose Iglesias should easily be picked off. And the Mets are given another opportunity. Brandon Nimmo strikes out. They get the leadoff man on in the 8th inning. They do nothing. They get 2 on, 1 out in the 9th inning, and they do nothing. And every time they're failing to score runs and get that big hit to break the game open, I will be honest with you. I will raise my, what hand are you supposed to raise when you're swearing? Your right hand? I raise my right hand when I tell you, not for a second that I think the Mets were going to win this game. I was being negative. And I watched this game. I consumed this game in a very odd way. On Saturday, I was flying back from Mexico. I was very lucky. We did not have crazy delays from the computer glitches, but we flew from Puebla, Mexico to Houston, Texas. And we were supposed to have a delay from Houston to LaGuardia. So the whole family sets up at like this little restaurant at the airport. And I'm like, everybody's calm. Let me start the Met game. At this point, it's about, I'd say 5:30. So it's about an hour and a half into the game. Let me start the Met game. And that's right. Open up my scorebook with the kids all settled at some random bar restaurant at George Herbert Walker Bush Airport in Houston, Texas. And I start the game. Mets do nothing in the 1st inning. Luis Severino works through trouble in the bottom of the 1st inning. We're through about 2 innings. It's 0-0. And all of a sudden, I've never had this happen before. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this. All of a sudden, our delay gets canceled. And they saying, hey, we're good to go. Come on up. We're loading. Boarding, I think is the phrase. Yeah, we're boarding. I'm looking at my wife. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I thought we had like 2.5 hours to just relax. So it was the first time I've ever seen a delay because they had pushed back the departure time to, I'm trying to remember. Let's say they pushed it back to like 7:30. And all of a sudden at 5:45, they're like, yeah, we're boarding. So I quickly shut my scorebook, shut my tablet. We get on that plane. Thank God. I mean, as much as I enjoyed watching the Met game at a bar restaurant at George Bush Airport, I want to get home, get on the plane. We get home. And then I pick up the game at, I'm not even kidding, 12:30, whatever time we were settled back in the house, unpacked a little bit. 12:30, I sit down and start the game from the 3rd inning. So I admit that was a weird one to consume. And maybe the first time I've ever watched parts of a Met game in 2 different states, in Texas and then back in New York. But even though the game was long over, I'm watching this and I'm watching Sevy work through his trouble, work through that brutal error by Pete Alonso, in which Sevy looks like he's getting a double play in the 4th inning, or at least he's getting a force out at second. And Pete makes that terrible throw to second, which could have been bad and could have really cost them the game. But Sevy stepped up, got a big strikeout of Xavier Edwards, worked through trouble in the 6th inning with his pitch count starting to explode, even convinced Carlos Mendoza to remain in the game. Though when Mendy came out for that meeting with Nick Gordon, I think it was before the Nick Gordon at-bat, I never thought he was taking him out. I didn't think it. I didn't think it because it didn't appear like Budo was warming up all too seriously before that. But Sevy had some extra spark on his fastball. He was topping out at like 99 miles an hour, and he made the big pitch when he needed to. He was not dominant. He only had 1-1-2-3 inning. There were multiple guys on base almost every single inning. But when he needed to make the big pitch, Severino made the big pitch. But despite that, I'm sitting there 1 o'clock in the morning. Never did I think they were winning this game. I was also pissed off to see DJ Stewart back in the lineup. I mean, Jesus. I know we got on base twice, so, sue me here. The Mets need to add a bat before the trade deadline. I am now convinced that it's not just bullpen arm, it's outfielder, because I can no longer watch DJ Stewart playing multiple times a week. And despite Jeff McNeil hitting the 2 home runs on Friday night, I'm also not in love with the fact that Jeff McNeil has to play all the time. Look, Jose Iglesias is the second baseman. I think Mendy has finally listened to us. I think he's finally listened to the Rico. Not that he has to get that from the Rico. All he's got to do is watch Jose Iglesias play every freaking day, and he'll know Jose Iglesias needs to play every day. So I'm certainly not, taking credit for that. But the more I watch DJ and Jeff McNeil, and even Harrison Bader really cool off. I don't mean to offend you, Pete, But Harrison Bader has gotten himself into a little bit of a tailspin where you start to wonder, like, are we getting the second half production from Bader that we got in the first half? Because isn't he like 0 for his last 18 or something like that? It's not good.
Yeah, and today he got on in game 3, he got on with a what was it, like a random error by Lopez or whatever the
it was the tapper in front of the catcher, and then Nick Fortes threw it up the first baseline. Yes, so that was his one time on base.
Yeah, and so it's at that point now. Listen, he's gonna struggle, but we've seen a lot of players struggle this year, so I'm not gonna pull the plug on him just yet because for a long time he played pretty well. But I have to defend Jeff McNeil for 1 second here, because there were some quotes this weekend which made me happy because I was right this whole time. And he talked about how he's trying to adjust his swing because, and we're not making the blame game here, but he said lack of shift has definitely hurt him. He used to try to see the ball, place the ball in certain areas, and he can't do that anymore because of the lack of shift. So now he's just trying to pull it. He's just trying to take it. He's just trying to hit the ball. He's not trying to see the ball and place it somewhere. He's just trying to hit the ball.
Why has it not affected Luis Arraez? Luis Arraez is a very similar hitter in which his exit velo is one of the lowest in the league. His bat speed, some of the lowest in the league, but he places the ball in perfect spots and he ends up winning batting titles every single year. And I know you've said that for a while about Jeff McNeil, that, hey, maybe the lack of a shift hurts him. And I'm not saying it doesn't to a degree, but to go from a batting title to this, to a 215 hitter, it's got to be more than just that.
Well, but Evan, I'm not a professional ball player. I don't even try to act like one, but it's hard enough to hit a 99 mile per hour fastball. Now try to place it where you want it to go.
Well, but you're saying that's what he was doing, and that's what made him effective.
Yeah.
Okay, now just be a regular baseball player and hit the ball hard and find the hole and get a base hit.
But you don't have those huge gaps anymore. I mean, it's very rarely now where you get those huge gaps where
I'm not disputing that it isn't hurting him, because it probably has, but we're talking about a 100-point difference in his batting average. We're talking about going from a guy that won a batting title to a guy that's hitting 215, and that just seems to be extreme. But by the way, even if you're right, even if I'll say, you know what, fine, you got me. That is the complete reason why he stinks. Well, guess what? It's not like the shift ban is going away. So now what? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Now what? Do you want to play him every single day just because he's admitted or at least told us what he thinks has caused us this slump that's lasted 2 years?
No, I'm not saying to start him every day. That I'm not doing. But what I am saying is that maybe now he's actually taking it serious and trying to adjust in a different way, which is why you see him hit 2 home runs in the game. Not saying that's going to be effective every game, but the fact is that, he's got to change his freaking approach.
Well, I'm glad he hit 2 home runs. What I'm not glad about is that he responded by going 0 for 4. One time he hit the ball hard. The 3 other times it was meek. And then, oh, by the way, he pinch hits on Sunday and he strikes out looking. So his response to the 2 home run game has been more of the same. That's just the bottom line. But look, on the positive side from Saturday, Sevy gives you the 6 scoreless. Jose Budo works in and out of trouble after issuing the leadoff walk. Dednell Nunez works himself into trouble, gets the huge strike out of Nick Gordon. And then, and this was so encouraging to see, this was maybe the most encouraging thing from these 3 games against Miami so far, and that's Edwin Diaz. It didn't hit me until Gary Cohen was explaining, hey, this is kind of a house of horrors for Edwin Diaz, this Lone Depot Park. Not only does he have the game from earlier this season where Josh Bell hit the game-tying home run, a game we talked about on one of our All-Star break editions of the Rico Brogna, where we talked about the worst losses from the first half of the season. Not only did he have that, but you go back to the WBC, and this is the site of the injury. This is the side of the celebration, and then obviously missing the entire year. So I'm sure mentally this is not a place Edwin Diaz loves. When he came out on the mound for the 9th inning, especially after the close calls that the Mets had in the 6th and the 7th and the 8th inning. I mean, think about how all those innings ended. You got 2 on, 2 out in the 6th. Severino strikes out Nick Gordon. You got the leadoff man on, a runner on 3rd, with less than 2 outs in the 8th inning, and back-to-back strikeouts by Jose Budo of Jazz Chisholm and Brian De La Cruz, all with a 1-0 lead. Then you've got Deadnell Nunez, giving up back-to-back base hits before he strikes out Nick Gordon in the 8th inning. So the Mets had gotten 3 consecutive monstrous strikeouts, stranding guys on base. As bad as the Mets had been with runners in scoring position, the Marlins were doing as poorly, credit to the Met arms. Diaz comes in the 9th inning, and I start thinking to myself, if they lose this game, if Edwin Diaz blows another, this is the worst loss of the season. We're going to have to redo the freaking podcast. Actually, no, it's a continuation. Now we start writing down the best wins of the second half and the worst losses of the second half. It's a clean document now. So if you want to play that game along with me, so far, I mean, do we have a great win? I don't know if this was a great win. I'm glad they won. It was more a sigh of relief that they won this game, but I needed to see Edwin Diaz come in and not mess around. Don't even make me sweat. And he really didn't, to his credit. He got Xavier Edwards to line out. He struck out Brujan. He got Jazz Chisholm to pop up. There was some thoughts when Jazz was up. Are we going to see another one of those? Edwin's a strike away. He gives up a game-tying home run like he did to Randy Arozarena a few months ago. But that was a really good job by Edwin Diaz. That was, in my opinion, the major positive from this weekend. Last time the Mets won a 1-0 game, and do not tell me that 1-0 game against the Marlins in September, the Fugazi rain game, where the Mets were winning 1-0. They gave up 2 runs, I think, in the 7th inning, and then the rains came, and then they suspended it. And if the game mattered, the Mets were going to have to come back to Citi Field and play the Marlins. If the game mattered for Miami, it didn't matter for Miami. They made the playoffs anyway. And then 2 weeks later, they gave the Mets a win, which is BS because they took the 2 runs away from the top of. I'm telling you, that win does not count. I don't give a damn what the record says from last year. So for the for us, for the Rico, just to clean up, hey, when was the last time the Mets won a 1-0 game? I can tell you right now, it wasn't that Marlin game. It was May 5th, 2023 against Colorado. So it had been a year and 2 months plus since the Mets had won a 1-0 game. And they did that on Saturday, a much, much, much needed victory. And then you got Sunday. Then you've got the chance to really cleanse the palate after a lifeless victory on Saturday, after a bad loss on Friday. Come out and kick Trevor Rogers' ass. And it was the same freaking story. Runner on second, 2 outs in the 1st inning. Alonso comes up small, flies out. Runner on first, nobody out in the 2nd inning. Tyrone Taylor, and by the way, the rose on Tyrone Taylor has come off. He strikes out. Then Nick Fortes proceeds to commit errors. Error number 1, hands the Mets a run. Should have been an unearned run. But this is, of course, giving the Mets a 1-0 lead that very promptly Christian Scott throws away. And look, here's the deal with Christian Scott. He has not been great. He is a young pitcher, and it always seems to be the one pitch that comes back to kill him. He did show a lot of poise early in this game, getting out of trouble, got out of trouble in the 1st, got out of trouble in the 2nd. What he did in the 3rd inning was great. Bases loaded, 1 out, and he's striking out Jesus Sanchez and getting Otto Lopez to fly out. But he makes the one mistake to Jazz Chisholm, and that was enough. His pitch count was exploding at a very early stage of this game, so you knew he wasn't long for the world. And you also knew the Mets didn't have a very available bullpen. Deadnell Nunez had pitched in back-to-back days. Jose Budo, I'm not sure the Mets are ready to pitch on back-to-back days. So you knew it was going to be a short bullpen. And so they needed Adrian Hauser to kind of gobble up some innings. And he did. He made the one mistake to Jake Berger. But again, this comes down to the same thing. The Mets couldn't hit. The forte of the New York Mets, whose offense was so explosive throughout the month of June, is they've got to score runs. Well, think about how they scored their 2 measly runs against Trevor Rogers and the cavalcade from the Miami bullpen. A sacrifice fly by Luis Torrens that was set up by an error by Nick Fortes. An RBI single by J.D. Martinez on a rally that was set up on an error by Nick Fortes. And then in the 7th inning, and that was the real killer to me, you're in a 1-run game. Francisco Lindor leads off with a base hit. You got the heart of the batting order coming up, and Nimmo strikes out. He's cooled off. JD strikes out, can't build off the RBI single earlier. And Pete Alonso, Pete Alonso needs that massive moment, that massive hit. And I thought in the 7th inning, after the oddities of that inning, such a weird inning when you think about what transpired. You've got Nick Fortes making another error. You got the weird balk. You got a runner on third, less than 2 outs in a 1-run game. As Pete was coming up in that sequence, I'm thinking this is where Pete needs to crush one. This is where Pete needs that massive 450-foot bomb. He's had a very, very quiet season, and they need a big second half from him. And so far, it's only 3 games. I haven't seen it. We haven't seen it. That was a huge spot in this game in the 7th inning, and he hits the ball off the pitcher's ass, bounces to Xavier Edwards, who fields it, throws him out at first base by half a step. And I mean, basically that's the game, especially when Jake Berger hits that home run off Hauser in the 7th to give him insurance. But the Met bats, that's the story, and that's going to be the thing because they need to hit to win. The starting pitching is not great. It can be decent. Their bullpen, as we all know, their biggest issue. They need to score runs. And in these 3 games against Miami, they have not done it. A very discouraging start coming out of the All-Star break. Now, here's what we do know. We do know that Kodai Senga is ready to return. His last rehab start, which was on Saturday, it wasn't great. He didn't dominate, but he's healthy. And he's good to throw about 90 to 95 pitches. And so Carlos Mendoza expects him to make his return on Friday night against Atlanta, a Brave team that is struggling, a Brave team that just lost Max Fried to the IL. Ozzie Albies is going to be out for 8 weeks. And despite the Mets losing these 2 games, the Mets are right there with Atlanta. They're only 4 games back of the first wild card spot. They're right there. So you can look at these 3 games as a missed opportunity, and it certainly is, to have gained more ground on Atlanta. St. Louis continues to find ways. Pittsburgh finally cooled off, but they're in the mix. Arizona blew a game in the 9th inning. They're right there. It is a jumbled mess in the National League wildcard race. That's why, man, I was talking about these tiebreakers, and half you people were laughing at me. They matter. Now, granted, the tiebreaker against the Chicago Cubs may not matter, but the tiebreaker against a lot of these other teams matter. Keep this in mind about St. Louis. The Mets are 3-2 against the Cardinals, and they got that one makeup game coming up in 2 weeks. That is a massive game. That's a one gamer. It's a weird one. It's going to be tough because I think the Mets are flying back from God knows where were they flying back from there? Seattle? And they got to go to St. Louis to play one game and then go back on the road. But that's for the tiebreaker. That matters. The 4 games coming up against Atlanta this weekend with the Braves struggling, with Albies out, with Fried not able to pitch. Massive. And that's when Kodai Senga is going to make his return. But what this team's got to do, and I say this every once in a while, that there are certain games in the regular season that matter a little bit more. Monday night is a big freaking deal. You've got the Subway Series coming up. You got 4 games against Atlanta. You got 3 games against Minnesota. Like, the schedule is about to stiffen. And quite frankly, the Mets didn't take advantage of this stretch. They really didn't. Let's do the math together. They were 4-4 against Pittsburgh and Washington. Then they won 3 in a row, 7-4, 9-4, 9-5, 9-6, 10-6, 10-7. In the 17 games of this 18-game stretch against mediocre or bad teams, really Miami and Colorado are the bad teams. The other ones are mediocre. They're 10-7. They have not done the damage, quote unquote, that they needed to do. And so Monday night with David Peterson on the mound against Yanni Chirinos, like it freaking matters. They just made Trevor Rogers, look good. They made Edward Cabrera look good. Mets have to find a way to win this game. Now let's get to your emails because I'm sure there's a lot of happy people. Brian Smith writes, when does Evan Roberts question bringing Pete Alonso back? Oh, there we go. Evan, I wanted to commend you for changing your position on the Pete Alonso debate. You're a man of integrity, and I admire that. Ooh, thank you. That said, you had recently argued that a shorter-term deal would be in the Mets' best interest, stating that the Mets could get a discount and that watching Pete hit 500 home runs as a Met would provide intangible value. However, Pete clearly won't reach 500 home runs as a Met unless he signs a. You know what? I'm done reading this. I'll tell you why I'm done reading this. Can I tell you why I'm done reading this? No offense, Brian. I talked about Alonso during the All-Star break on the show. I was working Monday and Tuesday, and we talked about his future and my confidence about him being with the Mets long-term and the crazy idea of trading him at the trade deadline. We are 8 days out from the MLB trade deadline, 8.5 days out. They're not trading Pete Alonso. Do we all kind of understand that? Can we get that through our heads? They're not trading him. They are probably going to buy if they do anything. Mark Feinsand had a report that the Mets are clearly buyers. Now, they may not do much. They may attempt to be buyers and not do much. But I think we can all agree, right or wrong, they're not trading Pete Alonso. They are tied for a wild card spot. They're in the midst of a race, and taking their cleanup hitter, who's having a disappointing season, and trading him when his value is not at his peak makes absolutely no sense, right? So we can pretty much agree with that. So then, Brian, with all due respect, and I do respect you, and I have no issues talking about this, but I don't want to talk about this right now. Like, talking about Pete Alonso's contract was something I did on Monday and Tuesday because it was the All-Star break. And we had a break. We had a chance to have a respite. Now the games are going on. And so here's the only thing I give a rat's ass about with Pete Alonso. He needs to wake up and have a big second half. And how about this? How about after this second half occurs, whether it's really good, whether it's really crappy, whether it's mediocre, whatever the hell it is. And so far, it's not great. He made a terrible error on Saturday. He was lucky as hell it didn't backfire. He came up in a huge spot on Sunday and hit that ball off the pitcher's ass and got thrown out by half a step. So we're not off to a great start. How about after this season is over, we could have endless discussions about his freaking contract and if you want him back or not. But here's my focus. This is just me. July 21st, July 22nd. My focus is right now. Right now. My focus is right now. They need him. They need him to hit. He has not hit. He has not had a great season. I don't care how many doubles he has. His home runs are down. His OPS is down. He's not had a great year. I'll be the first to tell you. And they need him in the second half of this season.
Question. Listen, I agree with you on Pete Alonso. There's no reason to sell him because you need him no matter what. But who at this point in time is someone that is tradable besides DJ Stewart? We all know DJ Stewart he will not be on this roster come July 31st. Like, it's just not happening. He's either get sent down, DFA'd, traded, whatever. Who is somebody, though, that you might say can be traded from this team?
I think the only trades I would make right now are to help me win baseball games. You know, I've talked about taking a starting pitcher and maybe using that to get a bullpen piece. I'm not sure how realistic that's going to be over the next week or so, but right now I'm not trying to sell anybody. I'm trying to win. I mean, the Mets are in a wild card race, and I think we need to use reason on how aggressive they should be for which players. You know, Tanner Scott's a guy who I think we all watched him over the weekend and said, go bring him in. My God, that would change the bullpen, but are we willing to do that at the cost of premium prospects? Probably not. So when you ask me, who am I willing to trade? I mean, right now I want to win. So let's talk about what makes this roster better. The Mets are not selling. I think that's clear. They shouldn't sell. I think that would be an odd thing to do when they're in the midst of a wild card race and they are dead even. And even though things could go horribly wrong over the next week, the odds of them just losing every single game and falling out of the race before we get to the trade deadline is very low. Here's another anti-Pete Alonso email, but at least it's about now, which I appreciate. I appreciate that because, look, I'm ripping him. It's not like I've sat here on the Rico today defending him. The defensive play on Saturday was bad. I talked about the importance of that at-bat in the 8th inning on Sunday. So, I mean, what am I going to tell you? Scott Stern writes, no real point in going nuts about another horrific, dare I say, selfish at-bat, such as trying to pull a 3-1 changeup in the dirt down a run with runners on first and second. You know, pass the baton. No point at all. But I'm curious, how is fan sentiment about Pete Alonso? How many emails have you gotten over the past month? More or less than one would expect. If he homers in the 9th inning to win, I'll credit this email. I appreciate people who email in the middle of the game knowing the risk of that. I guess the at-bat you're talking about is the fifth inning. He came up, and that's when he came up with the bases loaded. Now, JD just got the RBI single, so he came up with 2 on and 1 out. Mets are down by a run, and the count is 3-1, and that's when he tapped into what should have been an inning-ending double play, but Josh Bell couldn't hold the relay throw. That wasn't great by Xavier Edwards on the double play turn. Bell couldn't hold on to it. I wouldn't say that was a selfish at-bat. I don't think I would use that word. I would think that when you're a cleanup hitter and it's 2 on and 1 out, you're down by a run, and you get a 3-1 pitch, you're trying to hit the crap out of it. That's what he's trying to do. Unfortunately for him, he rolled over a changeup and should have grounded into a double play. So I don't think that's about being selfish. That's just not about executing. And that's about trying to hammer a 3-1 changeup that's a little bit off the plate, and you roll it over. Pete needs to wake up. Pete needs to hit. And you know what I think pissed people off? I think what pissed people off is that he went to the All-Star game, was terrible in the home run derby, was clearly less deserving than Nimmo and Lindor. Then he strikes out in the All-Star game, and now he comes back, and he's doing craps. He's doing crap. Here's another anti-Pete Alonso email. Boy, he's becoming the whipping boy now. William writes, how many double plays does Pete Alonso have to hit into a huge spot in important games before you realize how empty his numbers are? He should be batting 9th, not 4th. That he's a homegrown Met versus how bad he actually is in big spots continues to drive me insane, and I'll continue to remind you folks how much he's dragging this team down. Well, William, want to do an exercise? Want to do a really geeky, sort of interesting, I've got no motivation to prove anything exercise? And I promise you, I did this without like trying to prove a point. I want to examine the he never gets a big hit argument, because I think that argument is used a lot against any player who Met fans are mad at. So earlier this season, you would hear that about Francisco Lindor. He never gets a big hit. He never gets a big hit. And it's an overstatement. You're mad at him. Maybe there's been a lot of sequences lately where a guy hasn't gotten a big hit. And so you generalize it to he's never gotten a big hit. So I did a really interesting exercise during the commercial breaks of the Sunday Met Marlin game. That's when I did it. It was during the commercial breaks. I was watching the game live, which is a rarity for me. Kamala Harris is going to be the Democratic nominee. I figured that part out after Biden dropped out. So I was watching that the first few innings of the Met game. By the way, how odd was that? Like, you're sitting there watching the Yankee game or the Met game, and then your phone explodes with, hey, the sitting president's dropping out. And then I'm interested, and I'm like, oh, do I go to Fox? Do I go to MSNBC? Like, which vantage point do I want to go to collect this information? Or do I just sit on Twitter and keep the Met game on? So I put a second TV, a third TV, because I had the Yankee game on, and I flipped between MSNBC and Fox News. And pretty quickly, once Biden endorsed Kamala, I was like, all right, this thing's over. What, you have something to add about that?
Well, no, I just think that, and I don't like to talk politics, but I got to be honest, man. The last 2 weekends have been ruined with, like, I've been watching the Mets game, and then something pops up, and I have to, get distracted, and I can't enjoy my Met game.
Yeah. I like both at the same time. I think my mind is okay to kind of register both. So, look, 2 weeks ago is far different because you're talking about an assassination attempt. That's a little bit different. Here, though, we have something we haven't seen since 1968, which is pretty historic. So, yeah. So after I kind of digested that, I did an exercise. You ready for this exercise, Pete?
Oh,
and I'm telling you guys right now, I didn't do this to prove anything. Like, I know I'm the Pete Alonso stan. I like him. I'd like to have him back. I grew my beard for him. But this exercise was just about trying to examine if he's clutch or not. Are you ready?
Give it to me.
I was waiting for a dramatic. What? So I wrote down every home run Pete's hit this year. And I examined clutch home run, non-clutch home run, somewhere in the middle. And Pete Hoffman will determine, based on the facts I give, does that count as a clutch home run? Does that count as a who gives a shit home run? Or is it somewhere in the middle? You ready?
Yes, let's go.
Now, Pete has hit 19 home runs this season, and he has done that in 18 games. Okay, so there's one game where he hit multiple home runs. His first home run of the season was a solo home run down 7-5 with 1 out in the 9th inning that made it 7-6. The Mets would go on and lose the game 7-6. Clutch home run, who gives an S home run, or somewhere in the middle?
I would give it a somewhere in the middle, maybe.
You guys are crazy. That's a clutch home run.
I don't know. A lot of people will say no, it's not because they didn't win the game. But I'm kind of like,
that is so unfair, dude. It's not his fault. Well, it may be his fault they didn't win the game, but you had a home run down 7-5 in the 9th inning, you make it 7-6. I would think that's a clutch home run, no?
Evan, I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for other Met fans.
So you're going to go somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
All right. I'm writing down middle. Okay. Home run number 2 was a game-tying home run in the bottom of the 9th inning against the Tigers. They were down 1-0. That was when the Mets were winning their first game of the season. It made it 1-1. They would go on to win the game later in the inning 2-1. I mean, clutch, obviously.
That's a clutch one, yes. Good job.
Sometimes it's easy. All right. Home run number 3, April 9th in Atlanta. The Mets are down 6-0. He hits a 3-run home run in the 8th to make it 6-3. They would go on and lose 6-5.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because 6-0, you hear it, and you're like, it doesn't mean anything. But the Mets made a gallant effort. They got it within a run. They almost came back and won that game. All right, April 12th, up 5-1. He hits a solo home run in the 6th. That makes it 6-1.
And what's the final score at the end of it?
Final score was 6-1.
Oh, yeah, nothing.
Who gives a shit is what you're thinking, right?
That's what I meant. Who gives a shit?
Okay, there you go. All right, this is a tough one. See, some of these are tough. April 13th against the Royals, he hits a game-tying home run in the 4th inning. I mean, game-tying home run, 4th inning. Now, I could tell you they would go on and lose the game 11-7. He would hit a home run later, which we'll get to, but a tying home run in the 4th inning.
Anytime that you're down a run and you tie it, I think it's clutch.
I agree with you. We'll go with clutch. All right. Now his second home run of the game is this is an easy one. They're down 11-4, and he hits a solo home run to make it 11-5. This in the 6th inning, they would eventually lose 11-7.
Yeah, no, who gives a shit?
Who gives an S? All right. April 22nd, down 4-0. He hits a solo home run in the 5th to make it 4-1. They would lose 5-2.
Who gives a shit?
Wow. See, I'd go somewhere in the middle, but I get it. That's fine. All right. April 27th against the Cardinals. They're down 6-2. He hits a 2-run home run in the 5th to make it 6-4. They would go on and lose 7-4.
I see. I'll give that somewhere in the middle. It's midway through the game. You still have a lot of innings to come back, so you need to chip back. So somewhere in the middle.
I agree. All right. Also against the Cardinals, May 7th, up 6-4. He hits a solo home run in the 9th inning to make it 7-4. They would hold on 7-5.
Insurance run. I think that's. I would lean towards clutch.
Oh, yeah. No, listen, you're the decider in this. People listening at home are going to curse at you and say you are a fanboy, a simp, or an idiot, or whatever. But I
am an idiot, yes.
Here's the beautiful part about this game. All right, the game, you can play it at home. For anyone who hates Pete Alonso and thinks he never gets a clutch hit, play the game. And if you want to call all these who gives an S's, you want to call them clutch, that's up to you. All right, against the Philadelphia, this is a tricky one, and he's got a few of these, so get ready. Solo home run in the 1st inning to go up 1-0. They go on and win the game 6-5 in Philadelphia against the Phillies.
Again, anytime you either tie the game or give the lead, I say it's clutch.
I agree, because you're setting the tone for the game, win or lose. Same thing in Cleveland against the Guardians. Solo home run in the 1st inning to go up 1-0. This time they lose 6-3. You going clutch again?
I still go clutch. Yeah.
All right. How about this one? Solo home run in the 6th inning to go up 6-2. Mets would go on and lose 8-7. That was the game. That was the Friday night of Memorial Day weekend where Reed Garrett gave up the home run to Patrick Bailey. For those, that was one of the horrible losses of the year. But he hits a home run in the 6th to go up 6-2. They end up blowing the lead and they lose 8-7.
Even though they lost the game, I'd still say it's somewhere in the middle, because that's still, you're just padding on. You could have won that game easily, was it not for Reed Garrett.
That's why when you have these tack-on home runs, it's tough to just say who gives an S. Like, remember, let's go back a little bit earlier. I said, hey, Mets are up 5-1. He hits a solo home run in the 8th to make it 6-1. And you said, who gives an S? Well, yeah, because they held on and won 6-1. If the Met bullpen had been shaky like it was against the Giants in the game I just mentioned, it wouldn't be who gives an S. So whatever. Again, you're playing at home. You all determine whatever you want to determine. All right, we're up to home run number 13. We're almost done. Isn't this a fun game? You like this game, Beat?
I think we should do this every week.
We'll do this for Lindor next week. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? Like, putting this together literally took me parts of 2 innings. Like, it was really not a long process.
It's funny.
Go ahead.
It's funny because I was on the air the other day and I was just defending Pete Alonso's honor because your boy Al Cintron was throwing shade and saying they need to trade Pete Alonso. And I had to kill that. I had to stop it right then and there.
There's no way. I know Al. There's no way Al's talking about trading Pete Alonso right now. I don't understand the trading him right now. If we're going to have the discussion on the offseason, if he's good, what kind of contract you want to give him, like, I get it. But you're not taking your cleanup hitter in the middle of a pennant race when he's having a crappy year and his value's down and trading him right now. Like, that rationale doesn't make any sense to me.
He said Vientos could play first base, Iglesias could play third base.
But what are you trading Pete for? That's the part I don't understand.
Bullpen arms. I mean, come on. What are we doing here?
Anyone who's buying Pete Alonso is whatever. I don't want to get into this.
Well, the point of it was that I wanted to, once I heard him say that, I wanted to do the same thing you did. So I just got lazy, but smart move. Smart move by you. 2.5 weeks to do this.
I understand. All right, we're up to home run number 13. 2-run home run down 10-3 in the 9th inning. They end up losing 10-5.
Yeah, nothing.
Who gives an S? All right. Against the Nationals, solo home run in the 9th to go up 6-2. They win 6-3.
Again, I don't mind padding on, so it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's. I think a lot of people listening are going to say who gives an S, but with this bullpen, how do you say that?
Right.
All right. How about this one? 3-run home run in the first inning against the Padres to go up 4-1. So it's a 1-1 game. Hits a 3-run home run, puts them up 4-1 in a game they would win 11-6.
Yeah, I actually remember tweeting about this right away and saying, Pete Alonso's not clutch? What's that about? I felt like it was a strong statement from Pete Alonso right there.
And they would go on and win easily. All right, June 19th, he hits a 2-run home run in the 6th inning to go up 3-1, but the Mets would blow the game and lose 5-3 to Texas. That was the one game they lost to Texas. But his 2-run home run in the 6th inning put him up 3-1.
Yeah, it's clutch.
All right. Against the Astros on a Friday night, the one game they won, solo home run in the 6th inning gives the Mets a 3-2 lead. They go on and win 7-2.
At that time's clutch, for sure.
All right, we got 2 more. Against the Nationals, the Mets are up 5-2 in the 10th. Okay, 5-2 in the 10th. He hits the 2-run home run to make it 7-2 in the 10th. They win 7-2. Because
of the bullpen, I lean more towards clutch, but I'll say somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. It's ending it. It's putting them out of their misery. I wouldn't go all the way and say clutch.
Wasn't the day before that game where they like won 9-7 or something like that? Because again, like the bullpen was just as bad, or that was around the same time, right?
I think it was right around the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, that was game 2 of this. The home run he just hit was the game I was at with Jet, where I was in DC, and they had won the night before. I could look at my scorebook and try to remind myself how. But look, I think anytime you hit a home run in extra innings, it's better than who gives an S. And then finally, he had a tying 2-run home run in the 4th inning, the Sunday game against Colorado, but they would lose 8-5. So game tying 2-run home run in the 4th inning. They go on and they lose 8-5.
Yeah, it's clutch.
All right, so here we go. Here are the final tally, courtesy of Pete Hoffman. He's at 19 home runs. You would say 10 of the 19 are clutch. 5 are in the middle. And you've got 1, 2, 4 who gives an S's.
I think that's really good. I think that's really good for Pete Alonso. We could all sit here and crap all over him that he can't come up and he can't hit in a big spot, but I mean, they're meaningful. They certainly are.
Yeah, I think they're mostly meaningful. Here's the problem. I don't think he's done enough of it. That would be what I would say.
Well,
he
that's
hasn't done
fair.
enough of it. Like he is well below his normal home run pace that Pete has spoiled us with. Like he's not having, unless things change, a 45 home run season.
Well, you know, I looked at there was a stretch early on where he went like 2 for 39, which was awful. And right now, I think his stretch is like, again, he's having another awful stretch. I think he's like 20 for 89 or something putrid right now. He's had too many bad slumps for a walk year, and that's affecting what his tally is going to be. But I still think he could go on a tear, dude. And I'll let me sum it up this way: his home run derby was a microcosm of the season. He can't find his groove.
Yeah. Look, they're going to need him in the second half of the season. And for the person who emailed and said, how are Met fans feeling about Pete Alonso? I think the email shows you, and I haven't even read. I've read 20% of them. A lot of people pissed at Pete Alonso. A lot of people now pointing at him as the blame, at least coming out of the All-Star break, for their offensive struggles. And I don't think anyone's that crazy for saying that. He's the cleanup hitter of the team. He's had a very quiet first half of the year. It's only natural for Brandon Nimmo to cool off. Francisco Lindor hasn't even, fully cooled off. He's still getting on base multiple times a game. But I think the eyes now point towards Pete and say, look, you need to have a big second half. And I totally agree with that sentiment. And that's why Monday night, and we'll do a Rico after Monday night's game. It is the series recap. I know it's weird to not have a series end on a Sunday, but we will do one after Monday night's game. We'll react to that game. I tell you this right now. It's a big game. When you look ahead to the Yankees with Luis Seal and Garrett Cole, when you look ahead to Atlanta for 4 games, when you look ahead to Minnesota before the Mets finally have an off day, I really believe Monday night, David Peterson on the mound, big game for this team. Big game for this team. So we will give you a Rico Brogna on Monday night. We'll give you Rico's a drive home for Mets Yankees on Tuesday. I will be going to the Tuesday game. Don't think I'm going to Wednesday's game, but we'll give you another Rico Wednesday. So it's not one of those weeks where you're going to get Ricos every single night. A Monday Rico, a Tuesday Rico, a Wednesday Rico, and then we'll probably give you one in the middle of the Atlanta series as well. So the second half of the baseball season is here. Continue to email us. I apologize. We don't have time to get to everybody, but we do appreciate the interactions, even if you're mad at me, even if you call us names. The ricob@gmail.com. We can leave us a voicemail. We'll get to some voicemails on tomorrow's podcast. I guarantee that. So leave a voicemail tonight or Monday throughout the game, or some comments at 725-222-8699. I promise we'll get to multiple voicemails on the Monday edition of Rico Brogna. But for now, here we are, losing to the Miami Marlins once again. What else is new? Thank you very much for listening, downloading, and subscribing to Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.